Welcome to today's webinar titled Controlling Anger. We are thrilled to have Takia Tarleton with us today. Takia is a licensed mental health and substance abuse counselor with experience working with adolescents and adults in outpatient, residential, and school settings. She grew up in a military family and currently have family members serving in different branches of the military, which strengthens her passion for serving the military community. Without further delay, I will turn things over to Takia Tarleton.
Thank you, Stan, and welcome to everyone who has signed in to go over this webinar titled Controlling Anger. Before we start, just a disclaimer, the appearance of hyperlinks does not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense of this website or the information, products, or services contained therein. For other than authorized activities such as military exchanges and morale, welfare, and recreation sites, the Department of Defense does not exercise any editorial control over the information you may find at these locations. Such links are provided consistent with the stated purpose of this Department of Defense-sponsored webinar. So just some things that we are going to learn in this webinar is the positive and negative effects of anger, signs that anger is escalating, and different methods for being able to control anger. And we'll do that by looking at, what exactly is anger. And some of you are probably asking, what are some positive aspects of anger? So we'll discuss that. Different warning signs for anger because they look different for different people. And then how do you change your self-talk to be able to control anger? Also avoiding emotionally charged words that can kind of trigger an anger response. Thought processes that contribute to, you jumping to conclusions about things, ways to really kind of improve communication, some relaxation things to do to help control anger, and then we'll look at the 4 important steps about anger, when to seek help, and then we'll do a summary of things. So I'm sure that anyone can answer the question, what is anger, more so because of what we've seen, but just to kind of look at it from a different standpoint, anger is basically a secondary emotion. It's a response to an initial emotion that we may have, such as like guilt or embarrassment or hurt, that kind of communicates to our body that says, okay, we need to have a fight or flight response. And so that's generally how it happens. Something will happen, and we might have an initial feeling of, embarrassment. But it's so much easier to, pick up a glass and throw it at a window to show someone that, you're angry about it, than it is to just sit and cry, because that kind of pulls people towards you. And in that moment, it's almost as if anger is more acceptable for people. It does vary in intensity. Anger is something that we all experience, and we just experience it on different levels. And a lot of times someone may be angry, but you may not know it because there's a difference between anger as the emotion and then anger as a behavior. And generally when we start thinking about, someone needs to learn how to control their anger, it's because we've seen so many times that they are more responding to anger more as a behavior than the emotion, because it's an emotion that we all can avoid. But sometimes some people, depending on the intensity of it, their behavior is a little bit more unacceptable than the traditional. And basically what happens is the hormones are released in your brain that basically says, your body needs to learn how to react to stress. And if someone hasn't been really taught how to control their emotions and the stress that anger is causing on their body, then a lot of times that's where we get the behavior response that comes from different, like fighting or threatening people and things of that nature. And it's basically because someone may feel like, I feel like there's a threat going on. So again, it's going back to that, I have to fight or flight. And generally it's easier for me to show an aggressive response than it is for me to just be angry and walk away from a situation. If someone thinks that they've been injured or mistreated by someone else, then that generally triggers a response also too. And like I said, it's much easier to show more of an aggressive response than it is to just kind of accept the situation as a whole. So generally what happens is it kind of goes in a cycle. There'll be an event, and I'll use the example because we've all experienced it, of maybe getting cut off by someone in a car, that's kind of like the triggering event. But what happens is the thoughts that we have about that event is what generally kind of gets the ball rolling to get to the angry response. So if someone cuts you off, and then you may have the thought process that they don't care about anyone but themselves, or they're just not concerned about you or your safety, or even if you have, kids in the car, they're not concerned about the safety of your kids. So that's going to trigger like a higher level of emotion for you. And at that moment, generally what happens is you have to start paying attention to the physical sensations that happen. When people are upset, sometimes some people get headaches, sometimes their body temperature changes, they might clench their fists. Like, these are things to really kind of communicate, okay, this is something, an unpleasant feeling that I'm not having, and that's how you generally know, okay, this is what anger is. There are some positive aspects of anger. There's a defense mechanism, which a defense mechanism is basically ways that we behave to kind of protect ourselves from things that we may perceive as a threat. And it's called displacement. And a lot of times with that is you may see like football players or boxers who may in their personal life have anger problems, but they're using their anger into something that's more positive because it's acceptable to be on the football field and tackle people. It's acceptable to be in a boxing ring and to be boxing and hitting someone else. That's kind of how we communicate positive aspects of anger. So it's more acceptable in that it's not putting them in a situation where if they're just out in public going around hitting people or tackling people, like that's unacceptable behavior. So these are ways that they can kind of manage their anger correctly in an environment that's acceptable for them to do. It kind of helps them to be more motivated to take action to correct the situation because now they know that they can control how to respond to their anger in acceptable ways. Anger is necessary to our survival because it kind of communicates to us that we may be in a life-threatening situation and a response needs to happen. So anger is an emotion that is acceptable, but within certain contexts. Like, people have to learn how to manage it so that it can be something that's positive for them. I like how I was talking before about, like different warning signs of anger. Physically, you have to think. Some people may hold their stress because anger typically puts stress on your body. So if you're a type of person that when you're stressed out, you hold your stress in your stomach, and so when you get upset and your body's under stress, you might feel nauseous or, might feel like your stomach is like in knots. Some people may get tension headaches as a result of their anger because their body is responding to the stress. Tense muscles, also like the change in body temperature. You notice that you're starting to get really, really hot, or even you can visibly see that your face is like turning red because you're so hot. And sometimes it can just be in general conversation where there's a change in your facial expression to kind of communicate to someone, okay, that you are angry. Blood pressure, all of those things. If you don't learn how to manage anger, then it can quickly become out of control. And one thing I want to add to that is that anger is not something that just happens right away. It's something that kind of builds up over time. And how I talked before about the intensity is different for certain people. You may be a type of person where, okay, when you get angry, you kind of just like let it go. Well, how anger builds up in a person who, when they get angry, they don't let it go. More often than not, you're kind of keeping those feelings inside of your body. And so over time, it just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds. And then it could be the littlest thing that ends up causing someone to explode. So it's really important to kind of pay attention to physically what goes on with you when any kind of unpleasant feeling happens so that it doesn't build up over time. Then you really have to kind of look at, is anger creating problems for you? What is it doing to, like I said, your body? What is it doing to your thought process? That you feel like you can't trust anyone because every time something happens, you're constantly thinking, that irrational thought. You have something negative to say about it. Well, that keeps us angry. A lot of times we are angry because of how we think about a situation, how we may perceive a situation to be. That if we learn to really kind of think about it in a different manner that doesn't cause us the unpleasant feeling, and not be focused on whether what we think about it is right or wrong or true or false. Just that if I can think about it this way, it's going to make me feel better. I'm not going to have the racing heart. I'm not going to feel like if something happens, I'm going to explode, because I'm able to look at it from a different way. You might look at how anger might push you into negative coping skills where, drinking too much, or maybe even starting to use drugs as a way to really kind of cope with the fact that I have so much anger built up inside of me. I don't really know how to control my emotions. So let me turn to something to really kind of help me feel good in that moment. If you're not able to really kind of communicate how you're feeling and process what's really going on and why you're fully upset, maybe your response to anger could be throwing objects around or constantly snappy and irritated with people saying stuff to you. So you really have to kind of look at the bigger picture, like how much is anger really creating problems for you. There are several ways to control anger. And like I had mentioned before, your thought process with how you see things, and then putting that with self-talk. What do you say about your situation definitely affects your emotions. So, maybe you see something on TV and it really kind of makes you upset. And remembering how I said that anger is a secondary emotion, well, what was the initial feeling that you had? Was it, just a lack of disappointment in maybe the society that we live in? And so it causes you to have an angry response. But if you can kind of look at it more of like what other people do is outside of your control, then maybe that might settle some of the angry feelings that you may have for things that you might hear or see, in the news that goes on. Because at the end of the day, we can only control ourselves. And if we spend so much time caught up in trying to control situations and control other people in situations, then that gets kind of frustrating, which generally leads to angry behaviors. And there is a difference between, like anger as an emotion and anger as a behavior, and then the aggressiveness that comes from the anger. So learn to kind of communicate to yourself, which is the self-talk of how you can control how you respond to things where it doesn't have to be an angry response. And even if you do feel angry about it, you can acknowledge to yourself, like this makes me angry, but process that out, like why does it make you angry? Because with anger, there's so much underneath it that underlines, like what really is going on with that person. Because a lot of times we may not be so much angry about the triggering event that happened. It may be something more underneath. So it's really good to really kind of process that out and think of other ways to think about situations. And then also to be mindful of how you respond to people when you're upset. And this kind of leads us into, when you're communicating and how to avoid emotionally charged words. Like if you know that it's best to not use words as, things are supposed to be this way. Well, that's putting a lot of control and a lot of emphasis and a lot of expectation on things being as just like lined up to be so perfect. And the reality is that's not always going to be it. So if we can think about it in a way of, this is just as is, it's less stressful thought-wise, it's less stressful on your body to really kind of accept things as they are than to know it's supposed to be this way, because that's stressful. And even just saying it out loud, there's more emphasis on it's supposed to be this way than it is when you say, these are just how things is. It just changes the tone and kind of helps you to be a little bit more settling in how you respond to things. And there's alternative ways to think like that. You don't have to like certain things. You just have to learn how to get through it and adjust to it. And that's all basically life is. So there shouldn't be those expectations of people shouldn't be late or that it ruins everything, because the reality is it doesn't. There's still time to really kind of do things. You learn to really kind of adjust. And that's all with you giving yourself permission to just be and not have to have everything just as so. Going more with that is just the jumping to conclusions. Like an example here is that he did that just to make me mad. And what's the reality that people are spending their time plotting out, how can I make such and such mad? And the reality is that that's more often than not, that's not really happening. And even if it is, again, it's all within your control to really kind of view it in a different way. There is no evidence that he's trying to make me mad. I'll ask him to explain. If you can kind of get your thought process to be more in line with how you want to feel, which is away from the anger response, then it can help really kind of control the anger that happens. I mean, anybody's going to be mad if they have the thought process that someone's intentionally out to get them and intentionally trying to make them upset. But you feel a little bit more at ease if you're able to, convince yourself and tell yourself that no one was intentionally trying to do that. And if they were, you can't prove it. So it's important to really kind of communicate to yourself positive self-talk that helps you not feel so much of the tension that comes with an angry response. It's all in how you view things that kind of helps with the feeling of being angry and having a positive thought, and it really affects how you're going to behave. Not saying that the anger emotion is going to go away. It's going to be there. It's just going to help you have a better response with dealing with the fact that you're angry about something. And it takes a lot of being intentional about, I don't want to fly off the handle and say something that I don't mean or flip a chair over because I'm upset about a certain situation. I want to acknowledge the fact that I'm upset. It hurts me, it bothers me, and I don't like it. But I want to be able to tell myself that I have to think about, in the long run, what really good is it going to do if I flip over the table. It's not going to change the fact that I still was angry about the situation, and it's not going to change the situation. That takes us into just thinking about our communication. If you realize that you are in a heated discussion, a lot of times it's okay for us to take time out. We tell small children, hey, too much is going on, you need to take a time out. As adults, we have to be able to give ourselves permission to take time outs as well. When two people are having a heated discussion, it's never good to communicate at that point. It's best to just walk away and say, I need a moment to process this, and walk away from the situation, allow your emotions to come down, and then come back and try to have a conversation about the issue. And being able, the time that you're away, to say to yourself, is this really my issue or is this their issue? And why am I so upset about this situation? And process it with yourself in the moment. And then go back and have that conversation when your emotions are flying high. When you are having the conversations, you do want to be able to allow the other person to speak, which I know is extremely difficult for us at times because more often than not, when we are having high emotions, we're listening so much to respond because we want to say something back. We're not really listening for that understanding, and that's the only way that the communication is ever going to advance is if you're listening for understanding, and you can't really do that if emotionally you're high. So it's really important to kind of take that step back and really kind of think it through and process and allow that other person to say what they need to say, and then reflect back to them what it is that you heard them say. Because so many times, if you're upset and the other person is upset, they're saying something, you're saying something, no one's really listening to what the other person is saying. Or because your emotions are so high, you're perceiving what they're saying as something different. So it's really important, if you do want to improve the communication, to be able to say, this is what I heard you say, and allow them the opportunity to say, no, that's not what I mean, or yes, that's exactly what I mean. That's how the communication is able to improve. The emotions didn't go away. You just learned really how to handle the emotions in the moment with that other person. And the use of I statements are extremely effective in times like this, because it helps you to take ownership to what it is that you want to say and how you want to say it. I feel hurt when you ignore phone calls, or, I feel scared when you yell. Those are true statements. This is you owning how you feel about a situation or about an action that someone else did. And it changes the tone of the conversation when you're able to use I statements versus you didn't answer the phone. Because automatically, the moment that you say you, the other person that you're talking to wants to defend themselves. So it's kind of just added fuel to the fire. It didn't allow for effective conversation to happen, because when you say you, it's almost like you're placing blame. Versus if you say I, you're taking ownership for what it is. No one can dispute to you if you say I feel hurt. No one can can dispute the fact that you feel hurt because it's something that you said and you're taking ownership over the fact that you are hurt. But if you say, you did this, then you're basically opening up the opportunity for them to be able to defend themselves because you put some blame on them. So it really changes the tone of the conversation if you can kind of own what it is that you're saying and what you want. And doing this after you've kind of calmed down and take time to really kind of take a deep breath and really just process what truly it is that you're upset about. And if you find that, maybe you had said something before you took that time away and you process and realize that, I wasn't really so much upset because they left the dishes in the sink. I was really just upset because I had a long day at work and I've been doing, like all the housework all week, and this was just one extra thing. Say that. I wasn't really upset because of this. Be honest in the communication that you have with the person. And then also practicing relaxation. I know as busy as life is in this day and age, it's really hard to kind of find moments of relaxation. But I tell people all the time, if you have to go to the doctor, you have a scheduled appointment for that time, and you pretty much adjust your day to make that appointment. So schedule time for yourself. Schedule time to have relaxation. Schedule time to just reflect on what today was like. What was in my control that I liked about today, and what didn't I like about today, and what parts of the things that I didn't like that is within my control. And more often than not, you'll find it's just how you viewed the situation. So you have to take that time to relax. And relaxation can mean different things for different people. It can mean, for 30 minutes that I'm just going to turn my phone off. I'm not answering any phone calls or any questions for anyone, and I'm going to lock myself in the bathroom and listen to the water run. It can be anything that's going to be relaxing for you. One thing that we teach a lot is grounding, which is basically the use of all of your senses. Take maybe 10 minutes and just kind of, what can you see where you are? It's tuning into your surroundings. What can you hear? What can you put your hands on to really kind of feel? And that way it's bringing you more awareness into the moment of your situation and taking you away from the thought process that you had that was making you so upset. And that's something that you can do anywhere. If you're at work, you're in a classroom, if you're in the middle of a grocery store and you start to notice that your emotions are starting to get high, okay, well, what can I look at? Because it's taking my focus off of what I'm thinking about and what I'm going through and putting it on the immediacy of my surroundings. And it's just visualizing certain things. You can visualize a relaxing place for you. Some people for water, that's relaxing, so visualizing them on a beach. Some people it's mountains. Just creating mentally in your head something that's going to bring you down to allow you to be able to continue doing what you need to do without the aggressive response that kind of comes with it. Then there's looking at the different 4 steps once you start to notice that you're becoming angry. Pay attention to those warning signs. I know a lot of times we're not really aware that physically, I'm upset because I can see my hand shaking. That's kind of like a given. But like I said, some people may hold their stress in their stomach. So pay attention to the different warning signs that are going on with you. And then ask yourself, am I giving myself positive self-talk? Am I telling myself that I don't have to be so upset about this, that there's another way that I can look at this? I tell people all the time that in situations, you never lose, you always win, because whether it's a learning experience or, you always grow from it. So if you find that, maybe before something made you angry and you probably reacted where you did actually flip the desk over. And then, you work on yourself. You start being able to kind of think about things in more a positive light. And that same situation happens, and you realize that, I got upset, but I didn't flip the table over this time. And you might feel bad that, you even got upset, but it's okay to be upset. You did something different. So it's really just kind of looking at how you change your self-talk and communicate to yourself that, be angry, but let's find a better way to really kind of deal with this. And then process a lot. why am I angry about this? And looking at what is that initial emotion that I have. Am I angry about this because I've just been embarrassed in front of a whole bunch of people? Am I angry about this because I'm hurt? Am I angry about this because I'm feeling guilty? And deal with the issues that are causing that initial emotion to kind of help you control the anger. Because if you can get through that initial emotion, then more often than not, you'll see that anger, because it's a secondary emotion, most of the times won't be there because you've been able to resolve the initial emotion that was going on. And then cool down. Have those moments where, I've been up here and I kind of need a moment to come down. It's okay. Give yourself permission to really kind of do that in an acceptable way, depending on like where you are, however you need to do that. If it needs to be where if you're at work and you just need to be excused to go to the bathroom and kind of put some water on your face and just really kind of look at the mirror and just kind of talk to yourself. Allow yourself the opportunity to really kind of cool down from different things. When you know that you need to seek help, if anger is starting to affect other areas of your life, that's usually a time where you need to reach out for help. And when I say other areas of your life, like financially, is it causing you to have to spend so much money on court costs because you just completely cannot control yourself, and now you've gotten all these fines because you've been assaulting people, or, you have excessive road rage that's caused so many accidents, and now financially it's starting to affect you. Is it affecting you relationally, where other people feel like your anger is out of control and that maybe people don't want to be around you, or they feel like your emotions are so strong in this that you are a danger to yourself. Those are things to really kind of be aware of when it crosses the line of, acceptable anger to this is uncontrollable. And then, vocationally, are you at work and not able to effectively have relationships with your coworkers because your anger is just through the roof? Like, you're irritated, no one can get along with you, you're constantly getting written up. Like, this might be some signs to say that, okay, this is a time for you that you probably need to sit down and talk to someone. And it's okay to have to say that I need help. That's the hardest thing for any of us to really kind of do, is to admit that I've lost control. But the reality is, the moment that you're able to recognize that, okay, this is an issue, and you accept that you have a problem and you need to get help for it, that's like the biggest thing that you can do for yourself, because it keeps you from spinning more and more out of control. And it allows you to really kind of look at the underlying issues that are causing the anger to allow you to be able to eventually learn how to control the emotion, because it's so strong and can be so damaging, as you can see, into so many different areas of your life. So just to recap, anger is completely normal response. Like, we are all going to get angry till the day we die. It's going to happen. There's no way to avoid it. And even if you're someone who has had like severe problems with anger in the past, you're still going to have moments where you get angry. The key thing is to recognize that, okay, yes, I am angry. Why is it that I'm angry? How can I look at this a different way, solely for the purpose for me to feel better? These are what I call selfish moments. This is a selfish moment where I need to think about this in a different way so that I can feel better about myself, no one else. Because at the end of the day, if you can't think about it in a different way, then you're the one who's basically affected by you not being able to control your anger. And then recognizing that there are positive aspects to anger. There are other ways for you to really kind of relieve the stress and tension that comes from you feeling anger. And there are acceptable ways to do that. I mean, football players make a lot of money. And I'm not saying that every football player has an anger problem, but just that that's an acceptable way to really kind of place your anger in other aspects. So exercising is something, too, that kind of can release those hormones to take the stress off of the body. The fight or flight response occurs when anger begins to escalate. That's a natural part of our body that's going to say that, hey, there's a threat here. And because it's our brain doing it, our brain doesn't really know what that threat is. It's our thoughts and how we communicate that basically tells our brain, that tells our body that this is what the threat is. But if you can, again, think about it in a different way, then you'll be able to communicate to your body that, hey, this isn't a threat. This is just I have a response to a situation, but I'm not in this threat mode where I need to be in fight or flight. I just need to find a better way to think about it. So controlling anger will help you with that self-talk, improving communication with the people around you, and then help you learn to practice relaxation. Everyone needs to understand the significance of being able to relax from things. And sometimes a deep breath might help some people just get right back on track. But really just kind of asking yourself, what is going to make me feel better about this situation? If it's, I can't think about it right now and I'll think about it later, finding different ways to really just kind of look at the situation to kind of help you feel more in control. Because once you get to the point where anger is starting for you to be more aggressive, then you pretty much have lost control, and no one wants to feel like they've lost control. But you pretty much can be in control just based on how you think about the situation. And if you feel like your anger starts to get out of control, or someone mentions to you that, hey, I think you need to talk to someone, don't be afraid to kind of reach out and seek help for it, because there is help for it. So any questions that anyone has?
We do have some questions that have come in. The first question reads, as my friend's father says, who owns the problem?
Right. You own the problem. It becomes a problem for other people because of your response to it. So as much as you may want to believe that you don't have control, you have control over it, because your response to certain things doesn't have to be the response that it is. We decide what our response is going to be to every situation that happens to us in life.
Okay, the next question reads, can anger cause health problems?
There has been a link between different health problems with anger, because you have to think about it. If you've ever potty trained a child, the point is that you want them to be able to get it out. And that's the same concept with anger. If you're holding it all in, think about what it's doing to your body physically. I mean, there's been studies of heart disease. If you hold your anger in your stomach, gastric problems that can come from that, stroke. So there are correlations between health problems that come from you not being able to control anger.
Next question reads, is anger hereditary?
No, and I will explain that. A lot of people think that, because, my dad had problems with anger, that I have problems with anger. The reality is that anger is a learned behavior. So it's more so that you've been in an environment with a caregiver who showed you that this is how they respond to things when they're upset. So you learn that. It's not something that just automatically happens from a genetic standpoint. It's just this is how you've learned to deal with things from someone who has been a primary caregiver for you.
Okay, there are no more questions that have come in. Were there any resources that you wanted to briefly touch on?
Yeah, I have. There's the military family support centers. There's always chaplains and local clergy that you can talk to. Military One Source has, non-medical counseling that's available. And then also there's TRICARE, other behavioral health services that are available. And then these are some of the references as far as dealing with anger. Okay,
great. Well, at this time, I would like to, thank you, Takia, for sharing your valuable experience and expertise. I would also like to thank our attendees for participating in today's webinar. And if you find yourself having questions after the webinar is over, please email moswebinars@militaryOneSource.com, and I'll send the questions over to the presenter, and we'll get an answer back to you as soon as we can. This concludes today's webinar on controlling anger. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.